Hi everyone, Jeri here. Today I'm going to be showing you how I'm going to make a rice bag using recycled t-shirts. So before we get to that, I wanted to show you the rice bag that I made last year. I made this one using cotton quilting cloth. And I used my dot techniques, and that is a 3-inch square with a dot on it or a circle. And if you're not familiar, if you're new to my channel and you don't know about my dots, I'll put a link in the description below, and I'll put another one up in the window so you can see what I did with dots. I started making dots several years ago, and I went a little crazy and I made hundreds and hundreds of them. So this is just one of the things I did with them, is make this rice bag. So a rice bag has 4 sides, typically 4 panels, and mine are 6 inches, and then at the top they have a loop for you to put your string through so you can pull it close like that. So you've probably seen there's lots of videos on YouTube on making rice bags, but the one I'm going to make is going to be a little different because I am using t-shirt cloth. And I got interested in t-shirt cloth years ago when my mom passed away. I wanted to keep her clothing and do something, fun with it. And I started making quilt blocks, and it'll be a work in progress probably for the rest of my life. But she only had t-shirts, and so I had to figure out how to sew on them and be a little creative about it. So over the years I've been playing around with the t-shirts. I found this book, The Geometry of Hand Sewing by Natalie Chen, at my local library a few years ago. And if you want to go down a rabbit hole, Google her name. She has made some really amazing articles of clothing, and she does just wonderful things with t-shirt cloth. She's written several books, and she has a whole business where she makes clothing. Everything is handmade. Each article of clothing is individually handmade using t-shirt cloth and all these fun stitches that she's kind of put together in this book. So I'll just quickly show you the book. If you can get it at your library, take a look at it. And if you can't, I have a link so you can see it on Amazon down below look at this stuff, below my video in that description box. So I've been playing with this book with a stitch club that I started last year, and we've been going through and making samples. And it is just, look at this. It's just amazing. Her work is amazing, and I love this book. Okay. All right. I wanted to show you this. Let's move on. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know that we will be stitching through 2 layers of t-shirt and 1 layer of interfacing. And you will see that when I start to explain how to put the layers together. The second layer is not the lining, and you'll see that also. Watch the video in full before you get started so you understand exactly how this bag is made. So the first thing you're going to need is to get some t-shirts, and don't get the real thin flimsy ones. Get like the medium weight t-shirts. The really thin ones are very hard to work with. So you can get more than one color. In fact, I am going to be using several colors. So before we get to that, let me talk to you about this. This is interfacing. I don't typically use interfacing when I'm working with my t-shirts. And I thought because it's a rice bag, I don't want it to be too flimsy. So I decided to put 1 layer of this non-woven interfacing. So this does not stretch, okay? And I have black and white here, so you can use either one. But it's very thin. It's just enough to give the t-shirt a little stability. Now, interfacing sometimes causes a problem in and of itself. Add to it the t-shirts and you might have a real problem. And I'm talking about sewing. Now, I have found a needle. It's a Bowen is the company name. They're from France, size 6. And that needle stitches through t-shirts really nicely. If you can't find the needles, I do sell them in my Etsy shop. But if you have another needle that works, great. So what I would recommend you do is take a little piece of this interfacing and iron it onto a piece of t-shirt that you intend on using for this project. Now, I would recommend using 100% cotton t-shirts. When you add polyester into them, they do get to be a little more finicky. If that's all you have, go for it. If you can get your needle through it comfortably, even better. Now, as far as the thread goes, you could use whatever thread you have, whatever thread works and feels the most comfortable on your t-shirts. I have found that embroidery floss works really good, and button and carpet thread, believe it or not. I like that too. But I'm going to use probably embroidery floss in this project. So I'm going to use 4 different colors. When you work with t-shirts, you generally do 2 layers of t-shirts. So take your interfacing and cut out 4 6-inch patches of interfacing. Be really particular about cutting these out because these are going to be like your template, okay, for your bag. So cut out the 4 pieces of 6-inch interfacing and iron it down to your t-shirt. Okay, now you can see this is not even or anything, right? I just ironed it down. Make sure you leave, I'm going to tell you to leave 3/4 of an inch here, okay? And then once you get it nice and ironed down, then you're going to take a ruler and you're going to cut and give yourself 1/2 inch seam allowance, okay, around all 4 sides. And you're going to do that to your 4 panels. Now, I'm going to interrupt myself for a second to do a little more explaining before we continue on so you'll understand exactly what I've done. So first, you have to decide what your finished size is going to be. And I'm going to give you an example of all that in a second. So once you decide what your finished size is going to be, you're going to cut interfacing. You're going to cut 4 pieces carefully to the finished size because this is almost like a template that you'll be using. So cut 4 of those. And just make sure that you can use whatever interfacing that you have on hand. Just make sure you can put your sewing needle through it easily. So I would layer up the t-shirt cloth, the interfacing, and just try to needle it. If you decide to use t-shirt, t-shirts that have a polyester blend in it, definitely you want to make sure. And you can definitely use polyester blends. Just make sure you can get your needle through it. That is your ultimate goal. All right. Now, you cut 4 of those, iron them on to your pieces of t-shirt. Now, when you cut your t-shirt, cut it extra large, and it doesn't have to be precise. And you're going to cut it back, trim it back to make sure that you have a 1/2 inch seam. It's easier to do it that way than to try to cut it correctly the first time because it's a t-shirt and it's stretchy and it moves and all that other stuff. So do it that way. Now, once you cut your 4 pieces, you're going to iron that on, then you're going to trim this back to 1/2 inch. Now, the next thing you're going to do is cut 4 more pieces because we are stitching 2 layers of t-shirt plus this interfacing in the middle to give it a little stability. That's what I used for each side. Okay, now, the inside piece, this is the inside piece, is going to be cut smaller because you're actually tucking it in. You see, I tucked it in. So now let's look at this. Okay, this is the example. So if your finished size, and I'll give you a second to take a screenshot in a minute. Your finished size is a 6-inch. You want a 6-inch one of these. Your interfacing is 6 inches. You're going to cut 4 pieces of that. Your t-shirt, you're going to cut 7.5 inches minimum. That's the outside front. You're going to cut 4 pieces of that. Then your inside t-shirt, you're going to cut 6 inches wide because that's how big your finished piece is. And you're going to cut it 6.5 inches long if you want a fold over. Okay. Now, You can screenshot this. Make sure it's in frame. Yep, go ahead and screenshot this if you would like. I think it's going to be helpful to you. So now I'm just going to show you over here. Here's the outside piece with the interfacing on the inside, ironed on. This is going to be the inside piece. Here's my sample. This is my inside, and it came up and over and folded over because I like this nice folded over edge. So this is going to be my fold over. If I've decided I want the folded over edge, I'm going to trim this off, okay? I'm going to totally trim this off like that. And now let's flip it over. I hope I'm not confusing you. I hope I'm making it more clear. So now this is trimmed off because we want the fold over edge, and the inside of the t-shirt color, whatever that color is going to be, is going to come over like that. So that's why this has to be, the inside has to be the same width as the actual panel. Let's call it a panel. So it's going to do that. You got that? Okay. I hope that made it clear. And do take a screenshot of my cheat sheet here. So let's move on. Before we move on, let me tell you, if you don't want to do a fold over edge, this is super simple. You still have to cut the inside piece at the exact 6 inches. Okay. But then you're just going to trim both of these off at the top like that. So they're just both cut off at that thing. So now you got 2 raw edges, and you're just going to plan on doing a whip stitch. I was just editing the video and had another idea for you. So if you don't want to do the fold over where you bring the inside to the front, but you do like the idea of the finished edge up here, then just leave the front piece longer and cut this one back, and then fold it over to the back. So now you have your nice folded over edge. Yes, makes sense? So that was 3 ways to do the top. Now, let's talk about the edges of this. I do want you to base this down. Now, you can do a couple things with this. You can pin it and then go along and you want to do an invisible baste. So you can pin it and then go along and do your invisible baste. You can press it to hold it in place. Or you can do a quick, big running stitch baste just to hold it down. T-shirt cloth, some of it. This one's actually behaving quite nicely. But some of them get real curly on you. So this one's in good shape. So I'm just going to say, let's do an invisible baste. And if you don't know what that is, I'll just show you quickly. I do have a video that shows you how to do this. So you're going to knot a matching thread. And you want to hold this down. So you want to go in a little bit so that you're actually going to hold down that seam. And you're going to take, I'm using a dark thread so you can see. So you're going to take little tiny bites, just like a couple of threads, I guess. And it creates a little dimple look, and then you'll just come up again from the back and take a little tiny bite. You'll barely see these stitches if you use matching thread. So you're going to do that. And let me show you on the finished piece, the somewhat finished piece. So I did do invisible basting, and you can't even see it. And the reason you do that is because you know you're not, well, I don't say you don't know for sure, but you might not be doing design work where you'll be stitching right against there to hold that seam down. So this is what the invisible base looks like on the back. You can see it a little bit better on this gold one. So that stays in, and it keeps the seams nice and flat. So I want to show you two things right now. This is my bottom, okay? And this is going to be the bottom that's going to show on the outside edge, okay? And I mentioned that I was going to stitch it. Now, we just talked about invisible basting around the outside edge. This one I decided to do, and there's so many options, and please, you know, use your imagination and do whatever you think would look great. But this time, I didn't do invisible baste around the edge. I just did a running stitch because I want these seams to be held down. And then I just did this spiral, and I did it in a very similar color thread just because I felt like it. I don't know why. So now this is going to be the bottom. Now let me show you. This is the bottom that's going to show, and this is going to be the bottom on the inside of the lining, which I showed you that already. So I'm going to do something similar with this piece where I'm going to do a running stitch around there, so then I can remove this basting stitch. Okay? So now let me show you where we're at with this. I stitched all these together, and I used a whip stitch. And that's a whip stitch is where you put the two pieces together, right sides together, and then you just kind of whip over there. And I did take a decent bite out of the seam allowance. And the other thing I did, and I always do this with the rice bags, is I take a few extra stitches. I actually do this whenever I'm sewing these kinds of squares, which I do quite often. I take a couple of stitches at the end and at the beginning because that's where it gets the most, you know, wear and tear. Now with the whip stitch, you will have a tendency to see the little whips stitches on the seam, and I really like that. I don't have a problem with that. So that's what I did. I whip stitched all of these panels together, and I took as much care as I could to try to match this up. I think one of them's a little off. This one's a little off, but who cares? And so now I'll stitch this together here, but I wanted to show it to you out, you know, out and flat. And let me flip it over so you can get a good look at it. So when I was saying about doing the basting and how some knits tend to curl over, this particular one had a tendency to curl over. I think there was some lycra or something in there. It wasn't just 100% cotton. So you can easily use that. As I mentioned earlier, you can use it, but you just have to be you know, a little more careful about how you work with it if it's going to curl over. So I basted this first with a regular running stitch just to kind of get myself started with it, and I did press it, and then I did do the invisible baste as close to the edge of this as I could, so it wouldn't be a big curling lump. That's the only thing I'm trying to avoid. You're really not going to see any of this because it's going to be on the inside of the bag. But I just didn't want it to curl up and be a lump. Okay, I'll do close-up photos of all these panels at the end. I think it's really coming out cute. So the only thing I have left to do is stitch this, and then I can put this together, and then I'll have to do the loops up top, and we will do that tomorrow. I'm working on the lining now for the bag, and this is the way I do a lot of my squares. If you watch my dot video and whatnot, I like to fold over the edges. So I have a finished square, and then I whip stitch two pieces together. I really enjoy doing, when I do a square, I really enjoy doing it this way. So I wanted to show you how I get to this point. I take a piece of cardboard, and this is a scant 6-inch because my sides on my rice bag are 6 inches exactly. And no matter what type of rice bag I make the lining a little bit smaller. So I have this piece of cardboard that I just keep handy, and you see it says scant 6 inches. I take some spray starch, and I spray it into a little jar, and I get a paintbrush, and I go around the outside with the paintbrush and the spray starch, so that when I put the cardboard in and I iron it over, it stays like that. So I prepared 4 pieces for the 4 sides, and I'm going to do something a little bit different for the bottom. So let me grab that and I'll show you the bottom. So now we're going to do the bottom of the bag, and I'm going to continue to use t-shirt cloth for the bottom. I just want to show you what I did. So instead of using interfacing in there, I decided to use some of this flannel that I have. I love it. It's a really thick flannel, and well, I would say it's medium thickness. And I just thought it would be nice to use that in the bottom of the bag instead of the interfacing. And I'm going to use a piece of this in the bottom of my lining as well. So it's going to be a nice sturdy bottom. So what I did is I cut out 6-inch, because my bag is 6 inches. So I cut out a 6-inch piece of flannel and a 7.5-inch piece of t-shirt cloth. And I did the same thing I did with the sides. I trimmed it, the edges back to a 1/2 inch, folded it over, and basted it down. Okay, now I am going to decorate this. And when I say decorate, I mean I'm going to do some slow stitching on this. And when that's finished, I'll put all that together, my sides and my bottom. Now, as far as the lining bottom goes, I decided to use the t-shirt as well. So I'm going to use the same thing and just explain to you that this time I'm using this cardboard template, and it's a scant 6 inches, because now we're doing the lining, and the lining has to be a little bit smaller, ever so slightly smaller than the actual bag, so that when you put it in there, it doesn't like bubble up on you. So now this is the inside of the lining. Let me grab my lining. I stitched this together last night. So there's the lining. And this is a scant 6-inch piece. So I'm going to sew all this together like that. And then I'm going to place it into the bag. Now I have both my bottom pieces finished, and I just did a regular basting stitch, and I do the basting stitch kind of closer to this edge because t-shirt cloth tends to curl. So I did that with both pieces. Okay, the lining part of the bag is finished, and I put the bottom in, and I did, there it is, the inside. I'm real happy with it. And I did a whip stitch, and I just placed the bottom, you know, along one of the edges, and I did put a pin here and I put a pin here, just so that as I was stitching, the whole thing wasn't going to move, and I would, you know, be more accurate. And then when I got to the corner, I didn't cut the thread. I just went around the corner and I just kept going, and I did that to all 4 sides. And I just wanted to point out to you that I did not put a pocket in this, and personally, I just don't really care for a pocket inside here. I just like to put my stuff in here. I know that's crazy. If you want a pocket, take a few minutes before you put all this together and put your pocket in. And you would just take another piece of cloth, and I would fold under the edges. So let's just say this is going to be my pocket. I would fold under the edges, press it, like that, and fold under the bottom. I would fold this over too, so it would be finished. So it would be folded over on all 4 sides like that, and then I would just stitch it, you know, whatever size you want. Then you would just stitch it to your lining, and you'd be done. Okay, so let's move on. I'm ready to do the straps now, the little loops at the top. The next thing we're going to do is make the loops for the top of the bag. And depending on what size your bag is, you know, you might have to make adjustments to the size of the loops and how many loops you put on there. My bag is 6 inches, so I'm going to make 4 loops, one for each side. But if you can make a really big bag. In fact, one of the gals in my stitch club made a 10-inch bag. It's gorgeous, and she actually put her, she has a portable hoop on a stand, like it's about that big. She actually put that in the bag. It's awesome. And then her project goes in the middle of that. Anyway, I digress. So I'm making 4 of these, and mine are 2 inches wide. I just felt like that was a nice width. So I started with a 5-inch square, and I am not using 2 layers of t-shirt cloth because when I fold it in half, it's actually 2 layers. So you're going to need, to do this, what I'm doing is 2 strands of DMC floss and 1 strand of DMC floss, okay? And that's for the invisible base, but we'll get to that in a second. So basically what you're going to do, really simple, you're just going to fold a 5-inch square together, and you're going to make a running stitch 1/2 an inch in. So it's just, you're going to have a 1/2-inch seam. That's going to give you an approximately a 2-inch wide one of these loop. So I'm going to stitch this and then I'll come back. Now that I sewed the cloth together to make a tube, I want to lay this seam down. And if you're using like quilter's cotton or something, probably if you just iron it, it'll stay down fine. But the t-shirt's a little bit more finicky. So I'm going to do this a little bit weird because I'm working on the inside, not on the outside. So normally when I do an invisible base, you work from the outside, the right side. So I'm on the wrong side. So I'm just going to start, and I'm going to go kind of, you know, close to the edge here of the seam. Can't find my words. Anyway, I'm just going to come up almost right back where that knot is. So I'm creating like a little dimple stitch on the right side. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm doing the invisible base backwards. So now the next stitch I'm going to take, I'm going to just go down, and I can feel, because my finger's in the tube, I can feel the needle, and I'm just going to take a little pinch, a little bite. Okay, and I'm just going to keep doing that all along the tube. So it's like a backwards invisible base. And that'll keep the seam down. And then I'll show you. You can see it's got, the dimples are a little bit bigger than they normally are, but it doesn't really matter because this is going to be on the inside. When you put this on the bag, this is what you're going to be doing. Just like that, you're going to fold it like that. And I haven't stitched my bag together. I want to take some pictures first. So I'm using 2 different colors, the green and the burgundy or eggplant color, I think that is. So that's what it's going to look like that. And I wanted to decorate that, but we'll get to that in a second. Finish doing your invisible base, and then we're going to turn this right side out. And I'm only using 1 strand of DMC floss. Okay, when you finish and you get to the bottom, just make a little knot, and that's it. Cut it off. Now we're going to turn it to the right side. And just move it so that that is in the middle. And I did use matching thread, you can see, and you know, I made a little bit of a bigger stitch here or there. It's not a big deal. You're not even going to see it. So now I'm going to take my gold that I was using on these and just do a little running stitch along the edge. And then I'm ready. And then I have my 4 pieces. And I'm ready to, you know, put everything together. Okay, I'm ready to do the last step. And then I'll make the twisted twine. So I made all 4 of these. And they are just pinned in there at the moment. And now I'm just going to stitch a running stitch around the top edge. And it'll be finished. And then I'll get some twine. I'm not sure. I'm going to make the twine, of course. I'm not sure what color I'll use. But when it's all finished, I'll come back and show it to you. Oh, I just love it. I love it. It is all finished, and I decided to go with t-shirt yarn. So what I did is I took I cut a piece of t-shirt across the bottom. And, of course, it wasn't wide enough to give me a whole length. So I just put 2 pieces together, 1.25 inches wide, pull them to make it curl, and just I tied them together. And I used, you can see I used the green and the eggplant. And so there it is. There's the inside. I think it looks really nice. It feels good. And everything is stitched down, and I love it. All right, so I took a bajillion pictures for you so you can get a really good look at the finished bag if you watch to the end. So there it is. Okay, I won't bother showing it to you here because I took pictures and you'll be able to see that much better than this. So another project crossed off my list and put in the heck yeah, finished, done and done book. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll give it a try. Everybody has old t-shirts that they want to get rid of, so you don't even have to buy anything most likely. And yeah, I really enjoyed making it, and I think it's like a very unique, one-of-a-kind kind of thing. So have fun. If you have any questions, ask in the comments below, and don't forget to keep moving. Just play, no rules, and remember to find something to be grateful for each and every day. I am so grateful that this is finished and that I am really kicking butt with my heck yeah. It's my 5th project. All right, awesome. You guys are awesome, and I will see you again soon. Bye for now.